What's up, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros, the Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Chris Welsh, joined by two magnificent voices in the fantasy football space, the King of Bros, Derek Brown, and the Athletics' own Jake Ciely, and one of my co-hosts I've worked with for many, many years, and as I've said many times, spent, gelato and overnights with our dear friend Bogman, Jake Ciely, longtime friend, even saw WrestleMania together. We have great memories, and we'll make great memories today as we are talking about the 10 must-have players. We're already doing this, so who could they be and how can we dictate you have to have these players? As we record this in March, well, we're going to tell you all about it right here on Fantasy Pros. Mr. Jake Ciely, how are you, my friend, and how do you figure out the players that we must have this early into drafts?
So circling back, one, it was Royal Rumble. Get your facts straight.
What did I say?
We saw it together. WrestleMania.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, Royal Rumble.
Royal Rumble live on Chase Field, which was it you or Bogman that took the chair that I couldn't take home on the plane?
I think I took it. I took the extra chair. It was very nice. It was padded. It was very beautiful. We were like 3 rows from like the ring. It was incredible. Shout out to
Eric. It was. And the funny thing was, we went to an AEW with, Jay Felicio, and we saw Sting's last match, and we sat in those chairs again on the way out. I sold one of them for like $100.
I did the same. I did the same.
So back from Iceland, as you know, today, as we were recording this, it's also a 2-year anniversary. You didn't even give me congratulations.
Congratulations, my friend.
Congrats. And I thought about that is because we got gelato in Iceland, as you saw the picture. Every time, it's bittersweet. Nicole and I keep getting gelato, and I keep tagging you because I'm like, you and Boggs actually started that. It was us 3 that did that but we got it. We got it. And figuring out my top 10 was figuring out, I think Debro will probably agree with me, he's trying to find values on most of these. Like at this point, like there's no reason, but we both similarly have guys in these. There are ones that are like very close to what their ADP is, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be must-haves even at that cost.
Yeah, and Debro, it's a really interesting thing too when you're looking at these like 10 must-have players, because I think these guys are also probably going to signify players that a lot of people are going to focus on and that are going to rise in ADP. And the bigger question, it'd almost be a fun exercise to come back for this in like 5 months and see, are these still must-have players based on their value? But right now, finding and dictating those players, I think, is a very interesting process. Anything you want to add to, these guys that you chose? Because there's a couple on here that I'm like, these guys are going to be, there's 2 specifically on a rocket ship for ranks by the time we get into like heavy draft season.
Yeah, I think looking at this really comes down to talent situation, and I know some of that's going to change and shift, especially after the NFL draft. So some of these guys we're going to give some context to. But, I mean, for me, it comes down to when I'm looking at the board, it's a combination of both talent, situation, and some of it is value too, because there's some of the guys we're going to talk about here. ECR over at Fantasy Pros hasn't even caught up to where we're ranking some of these guys currently. So we'll see that kind of catch up both in the aggregate on ECR and as well as like if you're doing early best ball drafts, this is going to be great for you because the EV, you're going to be in a lot of draft rooms where these guys are going to slip and maybe they don't get taken where they should be.
Yeah, I think actually the best ball side of this is very interesting. Early drafters, this is going to get you ahead of the game. If you guys want to check it out, I will say fantasypros.com/rankings, fantasypros.com/NFL/rankings. You can check out. We've already got tons of experts that are getting in not only early redraft ranks, we've got Dynasty, we've got Rookie for drafts coming up. You can check out because we're going to be referencing this to these players. We're going to be using ECR on the overall and the positional and where both of these fine gentlemen have these players. So that is the setup here. Let's talk about the 10 must-have players for 2025. And Debro, actually, funny enough, you guys both have quarterbacks for number 5 here. But Debro, let's start with you with number 5 for you. So, by the way, each of you are doing 5 of them, so we'll get to 10. So, Debro, number 5 must-have player is whom?
Dude, this has to be starting off the list. It has to be Justin Fields. And I kind of alluded to this when we were talking about ECR. Right now, he's QB 26 in ECR. In my rankings, he is QB 12. And I think the proper way to look at and view Fields for this year is he should be a QB1 in your ranks. Like, because that's what he's been every single time he's been a starter. You look over the last 3 years. Last year as the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, QB7 in fantasy points per game. 2 previous seasons before that, QB9, QB5. So He will be, assuming he starts all the games and stays healthy. At this point of the offseason, I'm not getting cute and projecting anything else. Justin Fields will be a QB1 in fantasy, so this is a guy that I think even as rankings catch up to him, he's still probably not going to be ranked as a QB1 for a lot of different people. And I think it's wrong, man. So we know the rushing equity is there. He showed that last year, and he's going to continue that. He's not going to stop running with the freaking Jets.
Well, the weapons around him, too, are like ultimately fascinating, and like what he is going to be able to do, not just as like a running quarterback, but a full-on quarterback with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. I mean, there's some huge playmakers around him that you hope scheme-wise they're going to put it. 12 is a top 12 quarterback that's pretty aggressive. Jake, let me ask you this. Justin Fields or Anthony Richardson for this coming season?
Justin Fields.
Without hesitation.
One will definitively be the starter, and one, we'll see.
Well, one will definitively be the starter as of day one also. It's just, does day one last? Pat, like, let's be honest, that's not an open competition.
And the reason I say
Richardson
it is, yeah, well, and what's funny about it is, like, Justin Fields seems like he's floating into the Anthony Richardson of last season's draft equity and a lot of the hopes. But I think you agree with this one, Jake, and I think even your positional ranks, even though this is Debro's pick, might even be a tiny bit higher, correct?
So, yes, this is now the second show in a row that you Fantasy Pros boys have stolen people out of my list before I even got to it. Actually, the last one was Florio. He's not even with Fantasy Pros. He was the guest last week with me and Worm. Yeah, this was the top 5 winners, and the first off the list was Justin Fields, and I was going to have Justin Fields. And then, guys, do you have to have? I was going to have Justin Fields, and Debro already had Justin Fields.
Well, hey, why don't you not go to Iceland? Stop going to Iceland and amazing places.
The internet's not that good over there. It's not my fault.
It's March, Ciely. Do your fantasy work.
Actually, whoa, hold on. Their internet is amazing.
Really?
I mean, coast to coast, you get like at least 2 bars every. Like, I don't know. They talked about their infrastructure anyway. I actually have a question for Debro. Is like, why does he hate Justin Fields? Because I have him at 10.
Ooh.
So let's just put it that way. So I am fully
That's
on board with
appropriate
this.
ranking.
The past 3 years, as he was talking about, since 2022, if you look at his points per game, he ranks only barely behind Joe Burrow, just to give you an idea. So we're talking about 3 or 4 quarterbacks, depending. Of course, there were some that weren't playing in 2022, but like he's in the top 5 on points per game. So I'm with him 100% on this, and he's actually one spot in front of what is going to be my first name that I'm going to mention at quarterback. So he would have been the name that I mentioned first.
Well, and we're going to talk about that. I will point out, again, I threw out the Anthony Richardson thing. If you look at ECR ranks, Richardson is quarterback 17, while Justin Fields is currently 25. So, it sounds, especially based on your guys' ranks, it sounds kind of silly. And Justin Fields is going to continue moving up. He actually moved up 2 spots in 24 hours since we did this show, and it'll keep going up. But that's kind of the general space of where it is. You said you have also got a quarterback with 1 spot higher, I think you just said. So we're focusing on some quarterbacks at number 5. Your number 5 must-have player, Jake Ciely, is who?
Yeah, QB 14 ADP. I have him QB 11, so it's not a huge gap over it, but he's somebody that I would take over a lot of names that people might say, like, oh, no, I just trust that guy more. But when it comes to quarterback, if I don't get a top tier or Joe Burrow, I have in a tier by himself. If I don't get one of those, I want somebody who has the potential for top 5. I don't want quarterback 11. Like, if this quarterback finishes QB 11, I'm going to be like, that's not that great. I want top 5 potential, and I think Caleb Williams has top 5 potential, not just because of Ben Johnson, not just because of what everybody's talking about going into the second year and the changes there. It comes down to what was the biggest thing they also did in the offseason is they addressed the offensive line. Caleb Williams, if you go back and look at my rookie profile for him, is like I said, he has Josh Allen, and now I always profile for fantasy purposes to give people an idea in their head. Like Derek does a great job. A lot of people do of like say this is the player he's similar to stylistically, and there are some comparisons to Josh Allen. But I say like if you're thinking fantasy, what is like the line I could expect? And I said Josh Allen upside Sam Howell risk. And I think we saw the Sam Howell risk last year, but not with the interceptions, which I thought that was probably the most important takeaway from his rookie year. It was a struggle at times. It was the bad Sam Howell decision-making, but he didn't throw a lot of interceptions, and I like that from him now going into year 2. I don't even care if Keenan Allen comes back or not. It's more a fact that now you have an offense that's going to maximize his value if it's there, and I want that 3, 4, 5, more likely 5, 600 rushing on top of what he can do as a passer. If we truly believe the talent that we saw last year, now having an offensive line, now having a second year, now having an offensive staff that understands how to use him, I think top 5 is in play, and that's why I would take him well ahead of some of the names like Jared Goff, the old Ben Johnson. Like, I would take him over Jared Goff.
We have tiers on the Fantasy Pros ranks you can check out, and it's interesting. Caleb is the end of tier 3, and tier 3 is Kyler Murray, Jordan Love, Herbert, Bo Nix, Brock Purdy, and Caleb Williams. And you're saying you take him over Jared Goff. Jared Goff is the end of that tier 2 if you're looking at it. D-Bro, what do you think about this pick and Caleb Williams? And I'd also be interested you referencing Caleb versus like Justin Fields and where you have him, and what do you think about those two? Because those are right next to each other for Ciely, but Fields is one spot higher. What do you think about Fields versus Caleb?
I'm lower on Caleb. My question, is he going to run this year? Because we saw the rushing last year, and we saw it more down the back half of the season where he averaged 31 rushing yards over the back half of the season. I think it was like week 11 or week 12 on. I just wonder, in this new iteration of the offense with Ben Johnson, are we going to get rushing from Caleb because he showed he can do that? And does that add to his fantasy value in 2025, or do we not get the rushing? Because I think it's going to be a big divide. Like, saying he's 200 rushing yards versus last year 489, it could be the difference between being a top 12 quarterback or he's somewhere in the mid QB2 range. So I think that he could have a much better second season in the NFL with everything they've done this offseason. He has plenty of weapons around him. Ben Johnson in town. I guess, Ciely, I'm going to throw this back to you, man. Like, how much do you think he runs? Do you think he gets closer to that 400 to 500 range this year for rushing yards, or do you think that he's a little bit lower than? I'm guessing
that's what you said too, didn't you,
runs.
Jake? You said like around 500 yards.
So, yeah, I'm going to go back to that. Look, Ben Johnson has the job that Ben Johnson has because he's better than I am. But I'm about to reference something that I said last year that was why I believe this for Caleb Williams. Is last year I was doing a podcast and I said, if I am in charge of the offense for the Bears back when they were having the whole Thomas Brown shift and all that type of stuff, I said that I would stop going to meet with Caleb Williams, and this actually references something I talked about with Jaden Daniels, is at the beginning of the year, I actually said, what is Cliff Kingsbury doing? He's not letting him throw downfield. Why? And then I apologized to Cliff Kingsbury. It's like, hey, again, they know more than I do. He was making Jaden Daniels do check boxes. And I said, similarly, at the middle of the season, they're not doing that with Caleb Williams. They just throw the entire book at him. And I said, they need to stop, pause, and say, first read, if it's not there, run. First read, run. First read, run. Like, get him to use his legs. You go back to college, what happened in his last season when he was trying to play hero ball is he stopped running as much and he tried to run around in the pocket and then make these crazy throws downfield that often fell incomplete. So that second half that D-Bro's talking about is he was more comfortable. He was seeing those opportunities and taking in when, plays weren't there. So I do believe that if you're going to maximize Caleb Williams, if you're going to maximize this offense, that needs to be a part of it. Now, I will admit, Derek brings up, what is the risk? What if Ben Johnson comes in and says, you know what? He's just good enough the pocket. I don't need him to run. That is a possibility there, but there was a lot of outside runs that you saw with the Lions at times. I think part of that does come down to you can use Caleb Williams in that same aspect. So it's a question that is part of the reason that he's not higher than he is. So I will say there is risk, but I'm okay with that because at QB 11, if I miss, guess what? I can go grab QB 16 who turned into QB 10 next year.
Yeah, and both of these guys are preaching a little bit of the late round quarterback. These are quarterbacks that are on the back half of your overall starters, so the investment is easier to move through. You snag one of these guys, maybe you snag a little bit of a safer guy if that's your play, and you move through. Let's go to number 4 on both of them, but first, let's talk about our friends over at DraftKings. Because when it comes to college basketball and March Mania, one thing is for sure, nothing is for sure. Upsets, buzzer beaters, Cinderella's advancing, top seeds going home early. It's all going to happen. Bet the unexpected every upset every day with DraftKings Sportsbook. With live betting, exclusive content, promos, and parlays, DraftKings is the ultimate college basketball destination for March. If you're ready to make your first bet, check out the matchups and pick a team to win. It's that simple. You can bet your bracket or even letting you parlay the bracket with your teams or parlay a team to get to the Sweet 16 or even the Final Four. Parlay those bad boys together. If this is your first time something special for you. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Bet the unexpected with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Number 4, we're going to be looking at some running backs. Oh, how cute are you guys? You guys little pairings, quarterbacks and running backs. You guys are so in sync here. So we've got 2 running backs that we're going to pick with here. Debro, number 4 on your list, currently is ranked.
Stole it again.
Yeah, another steal. You're looking at more of the flex running back range, but there's a lot of upside because his competition kind of got out of town. Who is number 4 on your must-have players?
It's Jaylen Warren, and I know that in consensus right now he is the RB27. I think it's people hedging because we haven't had the NFL draft and everybody's expecting the Steelers to add a running back. And could they do that? Yes, that could absolutely happen. Depending on where that happens, though, that still doesn't mean that Jaylen Warren isn't the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025. And if he is, then he will pay off handsomely where I have him ranked at RB16 as a strong RB2. And I'll even go out on a limb and say, if he's the guy this year, he's an RB2 with RB1 upside. Because what we've seen out of Jaylen Warren when he's been given opportunities and he's been healthy, and I think that needs to be given context here because last year, he was not healthy all year. He dealt with knee issues, hamstring issues, and it really crushed his tackle breaking ability. But once he was healthy, we saw him go back to being the uber efficient back that we've come to love in fantasy. And I want to just be kind and rewind here, people. In 2023, we are discussing a running back that is now possibly the starter, possibly can get workhorse usage in 2025, that was top 10 in the NFL in yards per touch, explosive run rate, missed tackles forced. Oh, look at that. I can keep going on. Yards to contact per attempt, yards per route run. Everything you want from efficiency from a running back, this guy is going to possibly be a workhorse this year, and yet we're ranking him as an RB3. I'm not doing it. I'm not buying it.
So here's my question to you real quick, and I want to get Jake's take on this, though, is I think some of the hesitation on it is a word that you said, is people's fear, can Jaylen Warren be a workhorse? Are they comfortable being a workhorse and giving him that? And I think that is what is holding a lot of us back. What do the touches look like to you where he's an RB16?
15 to 17 a game. Like, I think he's going to split touches with somebody, but I don't even think he has to get in that 20-something range for touches. And I want to take this a little bit further back. We're still discussing a prospect in his final year of college. He had 256 carries. So even if we go back to, he has been able to improve in that he can stand up to the volume. He just dealt with injuries. Like everybody, like that's the running back position outside of, well, apparently last year, they get hurt. It happens. They play football.
Well, and his receiving equity is something that makes him so valuable. So, Jake, obviously you said this is kind of a steal, so you're going to agree. If I ask the question, is he criminally ranked at 27 on the overall, you're probably going to say yes. But let me ask you this as well. Can he be a top 16 running back with 15 to 17 touches?
So first, I'd like to give a shout out to thank you for the Blockbuster reference. That was actually my first job. So the Be Kind Rewind. I have to give a shout out for Derek for that one. It's funny is I am at 21, so I'm not quite as high as Derek as of today. Because to your question, do I think he can at 15 to 17? Probably, but this is where I'm going to go with it. I actually, as crazy as this going to sound, listen to me on this one. I think it's more likely 15 to 18 touches. He's pushing RB1. Than 20 plus per game. And the reason why is I'm going to throw out a name, Lamar Miller. I always use Lamar Miller because he was the best example of this. For years, the fantasy community was like, give him more touches, give him more touches. What the hell are you doing? Give him more touches. And I've said time and before, and just very on this podcast, teams and coaches know more than we do. And what happened when Lamar Miller got more touches? He put up the same stat line on more touches. He was less efficient. And that's why I say this. I actually believe that Jaylen Warren's best game is not touching the ball 20-plus times a game, and we haven't seen that usage from the Steelers because they probably understand that and know that. It's Arthur Smith as well, which is why I'm hedging a little bit, to reference what Debro kind of said before. I don't think I'm hedging a lot. I have him clearly in tier 3 with Breece Hall and Chuba Hubbard and Najee Harris, his former teammate. Like, I have him there with those names. And I would, if as of today, if you told me I'm from the future, they don't draft anybody in the first 2 days, I'm like, all right, I'll push him up to 16 with Debro.
Yep.
I just don't believe Arthur Smith's going to come out of the draft with nobody. So maybe it is day 3, maybe it's round 6, and I don't really care. But if it's round 3, maybe even round 4 because of this draft class, I'd probably keep him right in this range. But that's not a slight. I still do believe he does have top 15 upside.
Would have been fascinating if the Steelers would have traded for like Jordan Mason instead of the Vikings. Jordan Mason in Pittsburgh would have ruined all of that. Jake, speaking of the San Francisco 49ers, they traded away Jordan Mason. Look at that. They traded away Jordan Mason. They opened up a spot that's behind Christian McCaffrey, which looks very tantalizing. And that just happens to be where you're going with your must-have number 4 player.
Yeah, he's right now RB 52. I have him at RB 43, and I would actually love to put him higher, but there's just some names in front of him that are actually in split backfields already, like they're already getting touches. But Isaac Guerendo, going back to last year, and this is, I'll victory lap this, in the fact that I had him in tier 2 with like Isaiah Davis and Blake Corum and other running backs like that. To be fair, I'll come for myself too. I also had Kamani Vidal and like Will Shipley in that tier, so like I wasn't 100% perfect on that tier, but I really loved him even more after the draft because I think Isaac Guerendo's play style works perfectly in a Shanahan system, and I said that as soon as he was drafted. And that's why I love this, because as soon as they put that tender on Mason, I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Maybe they just really have a thing for Mason, and I'm just going to have to hold off for another year on Guerendo. But then the trade happened. I was like, yes, this is what I wanted. I believed, and I held tight, and Isaac Guerendo is rewarded to everybody who held on to him, especially in Dynasty, because he's purely the backup to Christian McCaffrey. Now, of course, we've seen it before. The 49ers, would it really be a shock if they came out of the 4th round with a running back? We're just like, oh, we're doing this again. But at least as of today, Christian McCaffrey, who, I'm still even drafting Christian McCaffrey as a top 5 running back because he has number 1 upside still. It's just health. But at this point, that health is getting riskier and riskier and riskier. And we saw Guerendo last year when he was finally healthy, by the way, the upside he has, which is top 15 if he has that backfield. So that's why Guerendo's here. I would love to even put him higher, but it's just, like I said, it's tough with some of the names in front of him.
He's like the classic handcuff in the handcuff world. It's like when he's the guy, it's like just skyrocketing value. Debro, what do you think about Guerendo being a must-own player?
I love the call. I mean, really, it's just, it's a hedge against CMC, and it's really just saying, like, look, like, if he gets the job, we've already seen this happen. And Jake's talking about prospect stuff from last year. If I'm reading this right, I had him as my RB6 in the class last year, right above Tyrone Tracy. And maybe this is a flex, but also a self-own, right above Tyrone Tracy and Bucky Irving. So I was very high on Guerendo as well. So I'm a big believer in the talent, man. I mean, his speed and his athleticism are just fantastic. I mean, we're talking about a running back that could break. And he did this last year when he was given the opportunities. He can hit home runs, man. So, like, even on limited volume, like, we don't need the CMC volume if he was their starter again in 2025. Give him 15 touches, and he's going to break a home run or two. I mean,
Welsh knows it, and 49ers got 6 feet, 220, and can run almost a 4.3. It was low 4.3s. Like, that's I don't think people realize that.
Yeah, and if you got those good tackles, like, he's not looking to sidestep or, like, he just plows into the hole. And if they bring a hole up, then boom, he's going to break it out. Big breakaway speed. Just quickly, Debro, in the world of, like, we don't really handcuff necessarily anymore, is there a more important spot to handcuff a running back with Christian McCaffrey with Guerendo? Is there another player that's like, if I take this running back, I have to? I'm trying to envision that, and I kind of don't know if there is someone that's more important. From a value perspective, I'm not sure there's a bigger gap between Guerendo as like the backup and if he became the number 1, but is there a more important handcuff in football?
No, I mean, I think the only other guy that, like, off the top of my head that I can really paint you as good of a picture for Guerendo is maybe Zach Charbonnet.
I thought you were going to say Blake Corum.
Well, Blake Corum's another one, I mean,
but I think that might end the list.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, though. And Guerendo's probably going to go where in drafts? Behind both of those guys? Just guessing?
Yeah. Ciely, what do you think? Is there a bigger one or one of those guys more important than Guerendo, you think?
I think that's probably the list. Like, I have Guerendo in front of Rachaad White because I think the Buccaneers are already starting to tell us, like, it's not like, oh my God, Chase Edmonds, but like they don't seem to be
Could be
quickly,
Sean
and this
Tucker,
is why we
too.
were like Bucky Irving last year, is like they don't seem to love Rachaad White, and deservedly so. He's very volume dependent. And even more so than what people want to hate Najee Harris for. So I'm looking right now, the tier I have Guerendo in is actually right behind Jordan Mason, but that's, again, because I actually think Jordan Mason gets more per week. But if put it this way, if everybody gets hurt that I have these backups with, to really answer your question, Guerendo would rank the highest. Guerendo would rank over Mason, over Ray Davis, over Blake Corum. Like, he would be the top of those, even though they would all kind of be in a similar conversation.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Friends, you can join the Fantasy Pros Discord community today. Chat with other fans and get access to exclusive AMAs that could wind up on the podcast feed. We had a bunch of those last year. You can go and chat in the D-Bro, the Derek Brown AMA as well. Here's our current schedule. You can get, it says myself, I think this is a Worm here, Worm and Fitz at 5 p.m. Eastern. The copy here, it's like, I'm not Worm. You can get Worm and Fitz at 5 p.m. Eastern on the first Tuesday of each month. You get Fitz and Bogman at 5 p.m. Eastern on the third Tuesday of each month. And you can get your questions answered and be on the show at fantasypros.com/chat. Join it today, fantasypros.com/chat, and get in the Discord. I got an AMA too. So actually, you can talk with myself, but just not with Fitz on that show. Let's go to number 3. Boy, I'm going to tell you, these are my favorites. These are like number ones for me here.
Can I just say that he's already gone 3 for 3 on like stealing names I was going to have on my list?
just murdering. If this was a mock draft, Jake
Gotta
is
get in
just
quick, Jake. Gotta get in quick, baby.
expletives and angry. But D-Bro,
Well, we got to get in. Worm and Welsh did the same thing. They're like, here's what we're doing this week. I already have the other person's.
that's
just
true.
As an example.
That is true.
So
but
do you want the real look behind the curtain here, Jake? I sent Welsh a Slack. I think it was on Friday.
Before
and
I
said,
even sent
hey,
anything out.
We got this show next week. I was like, here's my names. I was like, I was like, so just so we have this out there. I was like,
I got to
Jake,
look at future shows for me now.
Yeah. D-Bro's like, listen, I don't care what Jake wants to do. This is what I'm doing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, D-Bro, you are sniping left and right. This is a great name. This is number 3 on the must-haves. You've been preaching this since last year, and the moves have made it more apparent. Let's talk about your third must-have owned player for 2025.
Welsh, I'm just playing to the crowd here, baby. I knew you were hosting this, so we had to give a lot of 49ers love on this. But seriously, dude, it's like, can we just toss the rookie season, most of it, just into the trash for Ricky Pearsall? I mean, looking at the runway is clear, dude. You have Brandon Ayuk entering this year at not 100%. Deebo Samuel is gone. I love Juwan Jennings just as much as anybody, but we're discussing a first-round drafted wide receiver that is uber freaking talented, and we also got a snippet of what this could look like. And I understand people say, it's 2 games. You're cherry-picking things, because I can go back to the previous 3 games before that and say, oh, he didn't do anything. He legit didn't get any catches, any targets, nothing. Okay, let's discuss that. San Francisco featuring him in the final 2 weeks of the regular season in a lost season, that to me signals more of, okay, we're going to put more on his plate, and we can discuss everything off the field, injuries, all of that stuff for days, and what sidelined Ricky Pearsall. Maybe we saw this ascension happen earlier in the season if all that stuff didn't happen. But for me, that signals, okay, if we are going to walk away from Deebo, in the offseason, we need to see if we put more on his plate, can he handle it? Can he be the guy, or at least show flashes of being the guy we thought we were investing in the first round of the NFL draft? And Ricky Pearsall answered the freaking bell, dude. In the final 2 weeks of the regular season, he was wide receiver 7 and wide receiver 14 in fantasy scoring. He got almost a 22% target share. He got a 30.4% first read share. So he's operating, or was operating, as the wide receiver 1 for San Francisco's offense. And he had almost 3 yards per route run, 2.84 to be specific. All of those metrics are freaking fantastic. So yes, we always talk about invest in uber talented wide receivers in their second year in the NFL. We got a small snippet of what he could do possibly this year. And look at this. He is being valued right now in ECR as the wide receiver 49. In my rankings, I have him as wide receiver 27. I will be drafting Ricky Pearsall everywhere in 2025.
Only question I have on this is, do you have Pearsall over Juwan Jennings?
That's a great question. I have them in the same area code. Let me see. I think I have him right ahead of him. Where is Juwan Jennings? Juwan Jennings is wide receiver 34, and I could start making the case for him at wide receiver 30 or 31.
So you have Pearsall over Juwan Jennings, and that is where I disagree with you. Juwan Jennings to me is now Ricky Pearsall is going to be the big explosive play. He's the type of guy, especially with how we've seen the 49ers run with him, is play him across the field, let him. He's their Debo version. Let him get the yards after. Super fast guy, probably 4 catches, 85 and a score. But Juwan Jennings is going to be your 10-target guy. Purdy loves him. I like Juwan Jennings as the top guy. They love Juwan Jennings in the red zone as well. So my only caveat would be this isn't the old 49ers where it's like, Brandon Ayuk at 11 and Debo at 14. This is maybe them in the 20s, but to me, it's like Juwan Jennings at like 24 and Pearsall at like 28. Jake, you said 3 for 3. Obviously, you agree with Ricky Pearsall being higher than his wide receiver 49 rank here. Give me your take on the must own and him versus Juwan Jennings.
So, yeah, I actually am a little bit lower than he is on Pearsall, but not by much. But I am vastly far lower on Juwan Jennings. And this is coming from somebody that pounded the table in my waiver column. You and I were talking last year about like it was Juwan Jennings, but you kind of brought up an interesting point where I think it's going to come down to what is Brandon Ayuk. As of today, on the team, as of today, is he out there week 1? If he is, I don't like Jennings as much because I do agree with your assessment of Jennings. Where I disagree is I think that Jennings, as what my point was last year, is an Ayuk replacement and Pearsall's more of a Debo replacement, stylistically, the fit with George Kittle. So my concern is that Jennings just isn't on the field as much. And now I could be wrong, and I mean maybe just Pearsall can't even get past him and Pearsall's only out there in 3 wide. That's a possibility. I'm leaning more towards I believe in Pearsall being the higher ceiling, and this is coming from somebody who likes Jennings. So that's really the difference. I would just look at it this way. When it comes to these kind of situations where we're all, we're talking about possibilities, and I'm admitting I could be the wrong one here, is I'm just going to take the cheapest. So if it ends up being Jennings is the cheapest, he'll be the one I draft more so. I'll still take Pearsall, but if Pearsall ends up the cheapest, I'm going to take him because these are the scenarios where we can do our best guesstimate. We're trying to guess what Shanahan's going to do, what Purdy's going to feel comfortable doing, and you've brought up the rapport that he already has with Jennings. But if Pearsall's out there for 90% of the routes and Jennings out there 60%, that's going to be a big ding. That could flip the other way. So I'm on Pearsall, and I have Jennings right now because of that down in like the Mooney Shaheed range, which just ends up being like the 48 just because of there's so many freaking wide receivers to pick from next year.
I think it'll come to I'm a little bit of the Juwan Jennings soothsayer, as Andrew Erickson would call me, but I would be shocked if Jennings wasn't in all 2 wide receiver sets. I'd also point out to you that I think the signing of Demarcus Robinson might be a little bit of a tell of what's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk, whether there's a health issue where it's half the season or it is a clear they're going to get rid of him, and Juwan Jennings will go into the Brandon Ayuk role.
If Ayuk is gone, or even if you said he's still with the team but misses half the season, I go back to what you said and would agree. Jennings would be inside my top 25.
Yeah, like, and that would be something to watch.
Yeah,
and I'll add on. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, you go. I talk too much.
So I'll say this, and I wanted to get this in here. Brandon Ayuk could be traded in the NFL draft, and the answer to all of this could just be draft both. It could be Jennings.
I think it is draft both. I do think that is the answer.
As of today,
it is draft both.
Yep.
And the cheaper cost is a really interesting thing. I think both of them could come at pretty affordable costs, but you might see, like I said, the upside is in favor, I think, of like Ricky Pearsall and the big playability, but you could end up seeing both of these guys in the late 20s, and they could both be draftable. I think that is what you're seeing at the end of the day. And you could be like Demarcus Robinson. I think it's something to watch for. We've got the top 2 for each of these guys coming up, but first, let's talk about this week's Chasing Challenges, brought to you by Microsoft. Just like athletes who push boundaries and redefine what's possible, Business decision makers today are turning challenges into opportunities. Microsoft meets you where you are with tools and guidance that help you make an impact with safe, secure AI solutions. Players and teams are facing their own challenges. In this segment, we spotlight athletes or teams that are currently undergoing a challenge, what this means from a fantasy or a betting standpoint, and examining how we think they can overcome it. Whatever challenge you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the expertise to say, bring it on. This week, we're discussing Ricky Pearsall overcoming this competition. With Debo out, that is one less target. But Jawan Jennings and the potential return of Brandon Ayuk and the signing of Demarcus Robinson, Ricky's path is not completely clear on what it will be, but it is becoming clearer. Debo broke down the reasons to get excited. Now, he just needs to overcome the competition that's around him and get those targets from Brock Purdy. That's it for this week's Chasing Challenges. Remember, Microsoft's AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and make informed decisions, sparking new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more. Number 2. You guys have finally deviated. It's finally not the same position.
Hold up, Welshie. We got to go back to 3, baby.
I
challenges.
skipped 3.
Jake's got to tell me the third.
The challenge was me letting Jake have his third name here. You are 100% right. I got overzealous with the 49ers. Apology. Timeout to me. There's a false start. The holding and a false start, 15 yards. Let's go back. We did the challengers, but we are going to do probably the highest ranked player on here. And boy, it's hard to disagree with this, but you're going to have to spend a first, or if you're lucky, a second round pick on a must-have player. Jake, take it away, number 3. Sorry, it's not number 2.
No, I was trying to lean forward because I have to move my camera because you can see right there
that ball,
that wonderful football with a BT7 on it. Who I will, 100% victory lap from last year, because the reason I have that is because I found that before anybody thought he deserved it. And also when he changed his signature, if you've ever seen a signature from college, Brian Thomas 11, it's awful. Kudos to whoever told him to change his signature, because big upgrade there. Big upgrade in the fact that, like, I had him at tier 1.5 last year, and it's like I kind of want to put him in tier 1, but like just a little bit of hesitation on the risk, because, like, I brought up a couple of reasons. You can go back and look at that. But Brian Thomas with the Jaguars, I mean, let's just break down who he played with. I mean, he played with bad Trevor Lawrence. Like, let's be honest. At this point in his career right now, Trevor Lawrence is one of the biggest busts in NFL history. We're hoping we can get him back to what he thought he could be out of college. Similar style with Caleb Williams in the fact that, like, you saw the comfort start to show up when he ran more, and we need to get that back. And maybe these changes in the offseason, maybe everything finally gets him back to what we saw at Clemson, because we really haven't seen Clemson Lawrence really in the NFL. At times, flashes, but the biggest thing I bring that up to say is it wasn't very good play from Trevor Lawrence. And then that very good play, or not very good play, wasn't that big of a drop-off to Mac Jones, because Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence, sadly to say, aren't that big of a difference. And yet, Brian Thomas, similar to Malik Neighbors, who everybody wants to love, and Brian Thomas just continues to fall into the shadow. He fell into the shadow of all the top 3 rookies from last year, and he now falls into the shadow of Malik Neighbors of being overlooked once again, which, what does this Jaguars team did this offseason? I mean, they kind of got rumored to be in on some of these wide receivers, but they just went out there and like, you know what? We'll just have a bunch of jabronis at number 2. Like, it's fine. I'm assuming they draft somebody, if not the first, probably the second round. But Brian Thomas is going to walk right back into 140 targets. They're going to be better this year, even if Trevor Lawrence doesn't ascend as much as we want him to be. And that's why I do have him as a must-own at 7, because if I'm drafting in the back half of the first round, I'm not leaving the first round without Brian Thomas, who I actually have very small tiers at the top of my wide receivers. And he's for me, I'll give you an idea. My tier includes Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, end of list. Like, it's those 3 after the big group. I think they deserve, similar to his draft prospect for me, kind of a tier of their own, like a 1.5.
Pretty fascinating, too. Like you said, that team is just like, oh, is there anybody that could catch a ball or compete against Brian Thomas? Get rid of him. Engram, you're gone. Kirk, you're gone. We only have Brian Thomas. It's the only thing that we're going to have, and maybe we'll just get some complimentary pieces. Apparently, that's all you need. Debro, a first round is a must-have. It's a pretty interesting take, too, that Jake is throwing out to essentially say if you're at the back half of the first round, he's the
Even
player that
mid-back
you
half.
need to take. Yeah. And in a perfect world, it'd be great if he was like a wheel pick. But what do you think about, especially the high equity of a guy like Brian Thomas being a must-have?
I think it's a fantastic call, dude. I've got him as my 9th overall player. I've got him at wide receiver 6 right now. And if you're taking swings, like, and we're talking about a must-have guy, and we're going to draft him as a top 5 to 8 wide receiver, then basically this guy needs to have top 2, maybe wide receiver 1 overall upside with him. And we already saw it last year. He definitively has that. Like weeks 13 through 18, the only wide receiver in points per game that was better than Brian Thomas Jr. was freaking Jamar Chase. That's it. He was wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game. So to tell me this year with better play calling, maybe we get better quarterback play. They probably do add somebody in the draft, but still the unquestioned number 1 option in this offense is going to be Brian Thomas Jr. He has wide receiver 1 overall upside. So considering all those factors, I have no problem with this call, and I'm right with Jake on this.
All right, well, after the false start and we lost yardage, Brian Thomas got us the first down, and we're back. We're going to number 2 on your guys' list. As I was saying before the false start, finally it's a different positional pick that you guys have. And, D-Bro, wouldn't you know it, this guy used to be Brian Thomas's teammate. Number 2 of the must-have players is who?
Why are we being so disrespectful to Evan Engram? I don't understand it, ECR. You got to make me believe it. Like, why? Like, tight end 9 right now, and he's competing with what in Denver? Cortland Sutton? Marvin Mims? These are the worries that you have? Nah, man. No way. In my rankings, he is tight end 4, and he has top 3 upside. I'm shooting the moon with Evan Engram. All we need is health, man. And we've seen this play out. Like, when he has been the focal point of a passing attack, he has top 5, top 3 upside. I mean, just go back to 2023. He was the tight end 4 in fantasy points per game. And again, we've already talked about and kind of shaded Trevor Lawrence in this entire show so far. So do we think that we're going to get better quarterback play from Bo Nix in Denver versus if he'd have stayed in Jacksonville? I think it's possible, man. And he has the target drawing ability. He plays the role that we want in Denver. We're not going to get any kind of foolishness with Adam Troutman or whoever the hell else is left on that roster. I'm not worried about that. Evan Engram is going to compete weekly for the team lead in targets with Cortland Sutton. And Cortland Sutton, I mean, let's just say what it is. The de facto wide receiver 1 last year. Where he's at in his career, I think Evan Engram is a fantastic candidate to just lead Denver in targets. And I don't think it's going to be close because he's shown the ability to draw a high-end target share. I said he sniffed almost a 24% target share back in 2023. He could get upwards of 25, 26% this year in Denver with a play caller scheming up stuff to get him the freaking ball because he's the most talented guy on that roster right now as far as pass catchers go. So Evan Engram, yeah, sign me up, dude. Top 3, top 5 upside. We
have a live show we do. We got a Twitch, by the way, twitch.tv/fantasypros. We got lots of different shows. We have one show, myself, Bogman, and Joe Pisapia do called Out of Bounds live on Mondays. And Debro, you were in the chat this week. It was just me and Pisapia. And we talked about Evan Engram and the signing. And something I had mentioned that bothers me about the Denver Broncos is the weird rotational stuff they do. You got a couple teams that run big rotations where it's like these wide receivers in, these wide receivers out, and it kind of mitigates targets. Cortland Sutton was the constant, and there's the possibility that a constant could be Evan Engram on this, and he gets those targets, but I worry about that target share. I'm looking at the top 4 tight ends, ECR, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, George Kittle, Sam Laporta. You said Evan Engram is number 4, so who are you kicking out of that top 4?
The only guys I got above him are Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and George Kittle. Sam Laporta has to contend with J-Mo, and he's going to contend with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's not even going to sniff in that same ilk of target share. Jonnu Smith has still got to contend with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. TJ Hawkinson also has 2 really strong pass catchers. Like, for me, it's those top 3 guys. Like, it's Bowers, it's McBride, and it's Kittle. That's the only guys that I can make the case that can draw as many targets as Evan Engram.
Jake, you did not seem quite as excited about Evan Engram on this. So let's hear your take, not only at tight end 4 for D-Bro, but his claim of must-have.
Yeah, so far, if we are drafting together and D-Bros in front of me in these rounds, I'm not getting anybody, and this time I'm not getting in the guy because he's taking him way before I am. This is the first time we're like kind of on other sides. Here's the thing, though. I don't disagree with if the targets. So he brought up 2023. You go back to the year with the Giants, he was on pace for 135, 6, 7 targets, somewhere around there when he got hurt, and he was on a similar points per game pace that year too. My concern is that Evan Engram and half and full point PPR has always been more appealing than non because short area. He doesn't even do a ton after the catch. He needs those targets. He needs 130. He needs 140 to hit top 5. And if this is old Jimmy Graham and he's getting 130, cool. I'm just hesitant on that actually happening. And there is a world where Derek's exactly right. Like, he ends up being the top. Like, if they don't do anything in the draft, they don't do anything more signing wise, which is certainly plausible. I'm with him. Marvin Mims, fine. Like, the funny thing is Marvin Mims, I got so much hate for him. I was calling him possession receiver, and they're like, look at him downfield. It's like, yeah, but you're missing my point. Possession doesn't mean you only catch the ball 12 yards out and go down. It means you catch the ball and go down all the time. Like, he can run straight line downfield fast. It's just he's not doing anything with it. I don't think Marvin Mims is the answer. So even as the 2, I'd be in that 110, 115 range, which would put him where I have him back end of this tier. I have a very big tier 2 that starts with Mark Andrews and ends with Tucker Kraft, and he's in that Njoku. I mean, he's got his name alongside Travis Kelce at this point of his career, but Travis Kelce and those, I'm just hesitant on getting those targets because he needs those targets. It's kind of similar to the Najee Harris. Like, Najee Harris needs the volume or he's probably not getting there. Evan Engram needs the volume, and that's probably the only difference in what Derek and I think.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be split between where Derek and maybe ECR is. I like that kind of 8 range, and there are ifs. Like, those ifs are important. Like, you know, if he is like the number 1 red zone target, if he is getting a slew of targets, like, those are the things that are going to be exciting for him. All right, not skipping Jake here. Number 2, Love. This is a guy returning home, and you could question one way or the other. Did this up or even maybe take away a little bit of fantasy value if he could have been a number 1 somewhere else? Number 2 on your list of must-own players is who, Jake?
Yeah, right before the week he got hurt. You're going to talk about last year. I love that Derek brought up the fact that Brian Thomas in points per game was only behind Jamar Chase. Guess who Jamar Chase was actually behind when he got hurt? That being Chris Godwin. People already forgot he was the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy. Do I think he's going to be the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy? If he was last year over the course of the entire season? Absolutely not. But he was the number 1 on his team. He was much better than Mike Evans before he got hurt. Mike Evans actually was having a tough year, toughish by Mike Evans standards, until Godwin got hurt. Signs back with Baker Mayfield, back with this offense. The only question we have of today, similar to Christian McCaffrey, is he 100%? If you tell me he's 100% by week 1, he is a wide receiver 1. I right now have him at 16 just because I'm hedging a little bit versus consensus, which I'm sure is just not catching up, similar to the Justin Fields conversation and Jaylen Warren conversations we've had. We'll see him rise, but I have him in front of Mike Evans. I have him in front of Devontae Adams and DJ Moore and Garrett Wilson and names like that because he's back. He's 100%. He took a team-friendly-ish deal to come back with this team. And I think he's right back to being a wide receiver 1. I don't really need to tell you who Chris Godwin is, and I don't really need to tell you what they're going to do with that offense with Chris Godwin. I just need to tell you, hopefully he's 100%. And if so, even at 16, he's probably a value.
D-Bro, is Chris Godwin a easy slam dunk top 20 wide receiver to you?
If he's fully healthy and ready to go, yes. Right now, I will, and keeping this a buck, I do have Chris Godwin at wide receiver 28 right now, and it's only because of the health. If I got reports that he is 100%, he's rocking and rolling, he's doing full workouts, he is going to rise in my ranks, and I will be where Jake is. Where we're at in the offseason, I'm not there yet, only because of reports. If we got a blurb that came out tomorrow and it says Chris Godwin's running 100%, he's going to be a full go, like no questions at all, I'll be right where Jake is, easily.
Yeah, I miss taking McMillan overs every single week in on betting
man.
pros.
Man, those reception overs were so beautiful.
That's the
at
only
plus
thing that's
money.
going to make me sad is not doing that. But maybe Godwin misses a couple games and we can just get a couple.
Of all
old school
signings
ones.
this offseason, I was the happiest and saddest with one individual signing at the same time. Like I said, so many dynasty tiers for Jaylen McMillan, and at the same time, I'm like, yeah, there goes Chris Godwin again.
I think we all were.
But hey, your BTJ love is very, very happy Godwin didn't go to Jacksonville.
Oh,
Okay?
yes.
Very, very true. All right. It is time for number one. Number one on both of these guys' lists. Debro, let's kick it to you. We're getting back to wide receivers. Number one on your must-own for 2025 is who?
So in a very similar ilk as the case that Jake made for Brian Thomas Jr., I'm going to make the case strongly for Drake London. And I was in on him crushing last year, finally getting decent quarterback play. I think he still has another level that we haven't seen yet because of the quarterback play he got last year. Look, we should not have any kind of like false constructs about our ideas about Kirk Cousins last year. We all saw it. It happened. Once Michael Penix got in there, and again, I understand we're talking about a small sample size. I fully understand that. But the difference in what Drake London was doing with Michael Penix and so many different ilks I'm going to lay out here, it was huge, dude. Like, Drake London last year was the wide receiver 13 in fantasy points per game. He was third in red zone targets. So we know the role in this offense. He is going to get a bevy of targets and score a lot of touchdowns, man. So looking at just that role and how bountiful that is. Now you're telling me, okay, he's going to get used more down the field because that's what happened with Michael Penix. With Penix under center last year, Drake London's ADOT climbed from 10.7 to 12.5. His receiving yards per game jumped from 65.6 to 117, and his yards per route run increased from 2.2 to 3.74. Now, all that is to say, he's going to get used more down the field. It's going to give him more ceiling and raise his floor on a weekly basis. And if you add all of that to this awesome red zone role, I want to heavily invest in Drake London again this year because if we're taking a guy this early and he's wide receiver 10 in ECR and he's my wide receiver 7 in my ranks, I am pounding the table for this guy because I think, much less like Jake laid out with Brian Thomas Jr., Drake London has top 3 wide receiver upside in 2025.
Jake, do you want to start your draft, let's say from the 9-hole, Brian Thomas and then Drake London in the first and second round?
I would be extremely happy about that.
Feeling some
really
things.
When it comes to, yeah. It comes down to, like we talked about, just with Penix. So Penix, I said, let's be honest about what some people like Crutch do when they compare players is like it was kind of different for me to say what a lot of people wanted. Like I went a different way. Penix compared to Stafford and Derek Carr. Like, you get what I'm kind of hinting at there of like, oh, well, you can't do that. That doesn't make sense. But the truth is like that's the ability of fitting into tight windows. Some of his anticipation was off, but he's also a rookie, older rookie. But at the same time, like even in those pretty good, not great Derek Carr and Stafford seasons, like the pretty good ones, I think that's what you can expect for Penix. And the biggest thing coming out of it is the target share that he had for Drake London when he was under center was 40%, like average, like right around that range. Like obviously that's not going to continue over the course of the entire season, but even if you pulled that back to 30, 32, 33, we're talking about 140, 150, 160, depending on how much they pass. You could be talking 170 targets, and I only need 140 to similar what Derek said for him to be a wide receiver 1 because Drake London, even before Kirk Cousins, had terrible quarterback play and then had terrible Kirk Cousins. So he really hasn't had a lot of quality play like a Stafford or Carr. Even if you told me you get decent Carr, who, you bring up the deep throwing, and I say that for Derek Carr is that like we talked about it for years, is that Derek Carr is a better deep ball thrower than people realize just because he's middle of the road. He's not awful. I just need middle of the road Derek Carr. That's my thing. Take Derek Carr from 4 years ago, put him boom right now on the Falcons, and everybody's drafting Drake London pushing top 10. And that's, I guess that's really the easiest way to say it.
Man, we have constructed so far in our must-have players, like legitimately probably a strategic type of roster for you guys. We've had late quarterbacks. We've had a little bit, mid to late running backs, heavy wide receivers. We've got you a tight end. we're going to bring it all full circle. If you want to look at Brian Thomas, Drake London, and Ricky Pearsall maybe as your top 3 wide receiver, here is your flex option coming full circle from Jake's number 5 pick at quarterback. Your number 1 on the must-haves, Mr. Jake Ciely, is who?
Yes, it is a teammate of that quarterback, also in his second season. And right now, at wide receiver 36, I have him at 29. And depending on how the draft shakes out, I mean, he could end up pushing top 24 because so quickly people want to forget just because of what happened in the rookie season. I'll make the easiest example for everybody. Jackson Smith-Njigba rookie season versus Jackson Smith-Njigba second season. We said Jackson Smith-Njigba, the smart people, were saying like, hey, chill out his rookie season. He's going to a team with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Be patient. It might take an entire year. Maybe it happens halfway through, but be patient. We go into last season, say, Odunze, he's going to a team with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. Be patient. Understand he's the 3. He's probably being overdrafted in your league. And exactly what we expected to happen, happened. And now everybody's like, well, forget it. Don't want to Odunze. Odunze, to give you an idea, of, at least in my opinion, is bigger Garrett Wilson. That's what I said about him last year. Do you put an extra 3 inches and 20, 30 pounds on Garrett Wilson and still keep your speed and still keep your ability and still keep your separation? Now, I know people saw the highlights of Odunze last year, and I know they saw some of the decisions and the drops, and I know his dad did not help out anything by tweeting things all year long, but like, it's now he's walking into year 2 with Caleb Williams, year 2 in this offense I've already talked about, and year 2 of still being what everybody, there wasn't one person who didn't consider him a tier 1 wide receiver going into the draft last year. And the rookie season happens, and people are just so quick to overreact, and now he's dead. Now he's a wide receiver 4. They probably need to bring in another weapon. No, give me all the Odunze. I will have overshares of Odunze this year. Oh, you muted yourself, Welsh. Are you still in spring training?
Apparently I am. Debro, what do you think about Rome Odunze as the must-have?
Yeah, I'm in on investing in talented second-year wide receivers, and I think Jake laid it out perfectly. Like, however we want to slice it up, Caleb was bad last year. The entire offense was horrible, horrendous. So do I want to go back to the well and invest in a really talented wide receiver that Jake talked about? I myself was also extremely high on Rome Odunze as a prospect. Hell yeah, man. Let's go. Yes, invest in second-year wide receivers. Always. Especially the guys with talent.
Plentiful here. Who is your favorite of the must-haves? Put it in the comments below. And who's your must-have for 2025? Let's take a look. Where does it differ? And what did we miss? Make sure you drop that down here. Mr. Jake Ciely, what do you got going on over at The Athletic right now?
You'll like this. It's actually not fantasy football related because my ranks just came out, which we're talking about today. It's fantasy baseball. I am going to release an article. Why fantasy baseball is dying and how do we get it back? So there you go.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to have to read that. Tell me. I'm trying to bring it back. I'm trying to revive it. That is a part of my goal. If you like fantasy baseball, you can check that. If you like fantasy football, Jake has always got you covered, and we got you covered here on fantasy baseball as well on the Fantasy Pros MLB channel if you want to check it out. There you go, my friends. 10 must-have players from the best in the business. Like I said, we want to hear from you, and make sure you can go and check out all the ranks over at Fantasy Pros, fantasypros.com/NFL/rankings. You can check out from half PPR, full PPR, rookie, dynasty. You can check out the ECR and positional. Get all of that work in and see where you differ, and then you guys can drop us some of your must-haves. That'll do it. Thank you so much for hanging with us. I'm Chris Welsh. That is Debro and Jake Ciely, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Fantasy Pros, the Football Podcast.